I got you. Let me turn this down too because I know this getting away the video. I was just watching half my videos earlier and I actually seen it. What is up, guys? It's your boy Moo. Now, today we're back again on another video. Today we're back again with another. I don't think we ever react to horrifying cases on the YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But today is probably gonna be the first time we react to that. But yeah, I'm gonna start reacting to these since you have to find more stuff to be more entertaining on the channel to watch, and you ain't just sitting here bored as hell while watching the video. But yeah, we reacted to a case that's so gruesome, police needed therapy. The reason I chose this video is because if the title was that, it's probably gonna be good. They're promoting it well. So for ado, we finna get into the video though.
This case takes place in the USA and spans over a number of years. Meet Murray Troy Travis. Murray was born on the 25th of October 1965 in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, one of the major cities along the Mississippi River. He was raised in a poor area and lived on the breadline. There isn't much information to mention about his formative years, although his former teacher remembered him only because of how unusual he was. After graduating in 1985, he spent 2 years in the Army Reserve working as a medical and dental assistant. He later held various jobs, including working for trucking companies and volunteering at a nursing home. On the surface, nothing was alarming about his life, which is bizarre when we consider the deplorable and diabolical acts he later committed. It was in 1987 where his life began to unravel. He became addicted to crack cocaine, which was a habit that quickly spiraled out of control. By 1988, at the age of 23, his addiction had totally consumed him. He was spending as much as $300 a day on drugs, which led him to commit a series of robberies to pay for more drugs. In the span of 8 days, he robbed 5 shoe stores across the county. When the police eventually arrested him, he was neither aggressive nor hostile. Officers later described him as quite respectful. When he appeared in court, he claimed that his drug use had clouded his memory of the robberies. He pleaded for leniency, telling the judge that he had completed rehabilitation and was no longer using drugs after spending some time in jail before the trial. However, just months before his 24th birthday, a judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Around 2 months into the sentence, Maury sent a handwritten letter to the judge, pleading for reconsideration. He described prison as unbearable, saying that he cried himself to sleep most nights and his mental health was deteriorating. Suffice to say, the judge did not respond.
Was this after he
After
did what he
serving just
did?
over 5 years,
They
Maury
didn't even tell us what he did yet.
was released on parole. He was 29 years old and the year was 1994. Those who interacted with him afterwards described him as polite and an unassuming man. A neighbor recalled how he would hum and sing when entering the shared basement of their building, making sure she knew he was there so he wouldn't startle her. Another neighbor, who often drank beer with him, said he never noticed anything strange about him, which is rather strange, as he would soon become known as the Streetwalker Strangler.
That's crazy. Yo, y'all gotta chill with these ads, bro.
Immerses you in a universe with that.
During the summers of 2000 and 2001, he was working as a waiter at a hotel restaurant. One day, a co-worker named Dave mentioned that a friend's stolen car had been found burned in East St. Louis. Maury didn't seem surprised. He casually remarked that East St. Louis was a good place to dump things because the police didn't patrol the area often. Dave thought to himself. He thought that this was a strange comment to make. Why would Maury be an expert on knowing where the police didn't patrol? This made the colleague rather suspicious of him. Maury also had a girlfriend, a woman named Julie. At the time, Julie was working as an intern for KDL News, and she remembers Maury saying something rather disturbing. Maury turned to Julie and asked her if the station had ever done a story on the escorts who were being murdered at the time. From 2000 to 2001, several escorts were found dead dumped in East St. Louis and other areas. However, this wasn't public knowledge yet. The police had decided to not yet tell the media. Whilst Maury was talking to his girlfriend, he referred to this person as a serial killer. Julie found the information strange but intriguing. It pricked her journalistic senses, and she pitched the idea to her boss at the station. However, the boss had no idea about these murders yet. Less than 3 months later, the police publicly announced that a serial killer had likely been preying on escorts in that area. These were African American women who were addicted to drugs and often living on the streets. In St. Louis, the common area known for its crack houses was called the Stroll. People who hang around the Stroll can be seen walking the streets for days on end. They have matted hair and wear the same clothing for weeks at a time. These women have no permanent or safe residences. They were exposed and at the mercy of their next customers. They worked so they could buy more illegal substances, and Maury Travis knew this area. He knew it for the access to drugs and the access to vulnerable victims. The serial killer who had been preying on these women was in fact Maury Travis. Still to this day, there is no timeline of events, but it is suspected that Maury went on a killing spree from the 19th of March 2000 to the day of his arrest 2 years later. What we do know is his clear modus operandi. First, Maury would cruise up the Stroll, eyeing up the local women of the night, most of which were African American, just as Maury desired. Once he had his mind set on one of the women, he would approach them. He came across nice, polite, and like any other person seeking their services. Only, he was not like anyone else. What he intended to do was beyond imaginable. After some small talk during a ride home to his house in Ferguson, he would welcome them into his house. What's strange is that he filmed these interactions. First, he would give them some illegal substances and then sleep with them in his bedroom. Once he had had his fill, he turned to satisfy a more darker need. He now made them engage in ritual-like activities. He brought one victim into his living room, made her change into a white dress, before placing sunglasses on her face. Still to this day, nobody quite knows why he did these strange things. And then, when the women are least expecting it, he would pull out an extremely powerful taser and shock the victim just below the collarbone, rendering them completely incapacitated. He then grabbed the women by the legs and dragged them through his house into the basement, which was later named his torture chamber. The police recall watching the footage at a later date, hearing the bodies bang along the staircase as he dragged them down into his lair. Maury's demeanor then rapidly changed.
Taser? Wait a fucking minute. Yo, what? Wait. I didn't know tasers could be that powerful. Oh. Damn. So he's basically killing people. Okay. He killed them with a taser, basically.
He became hostile, combative, and very degrading. There was a single thick wooden column in the center of the torture chamber, which he would use to restrain the women against. He would strip them completely naked and handcuff their hands and feet behind them around the column, leaving them on their knees. Maury then began interrogating them, asking them who's looking after their children. He made his point very clear. These women were to him subhuman for putting drugs and their jobs before their children. He even filmed them asking if they wanted to say anything to their children. The women would then endure further humiliation and torture over the course of several days. He would beat them black and blue. He would lacerate the women with kitchen utensils, drawing blood which would spray across the basement, and he cared very little for cleaning up. After killing a victim, Maury would extract something from them, an item of clothing or a piece of jewelry, anything to keep as a souvenir. Next, he would eject any films he had made in his camcorder and place them in a safe spacing in the cavity of his dungeon wall. He would then discard the bodies in a wide range of locations. A 34-year-old woman by the name of Alyssa Greenwade was one of his victims. She lived on the Stroll and was found dead in Washington Park on the 1st of April 2001, with strangulation marks around her neck. Teresa Wilson, aged 36, was found dead by strangulation in a ditch off Highway 67 on the 15th of May 2001. Betty James, aged 46, was found on the 23rd of May 2001 and was one of the women who starred in Maury's graphic tapes. She was one of the only victims who stated her real name when she was asked on camera. She was also found with tire marks across her legs, indicating that Maury had run her over at some point. Then, on the 29th of June 2001, only 16 feet from where Teresa was found, was the body of Verona Thompson, who was aged 36. Then, on the 25th of August 2001, a decomposing 50-year-old woman named Yvonne Cruz was found strangled and tortured to death. Then there was 33-year-old Brenda Beasley, who was also strangled and dumped in some garbage only a few months later. Brenda and Yvonne had DNA inside their private parts from the same male. This was later discovered to be Maury's. The list continued with a series of discovered skeletal remains which proved little information with regard to the manner of their death. Maury had no regard for his victims. Teresa Wilson was a mother to a daughter called Chastity. She would take her daughter to the spot where she would meet her clientele. They would both sit on a bench next to a payphone. When Teresa had a client, she would leave her daughter on a bench for up to an hour and then return.
What the fuck? What is wrong with these people, bro?
So when Maury drove up to Teresa, he took her mother knowing that he was going to end her life. Chastity sat and waited for her mother for hours, ultimately for her to never return. He saw these women as trash, so much so that he dumped many of his victims in heavily vegetated areas of highways and mostly in East St. Louis. Some of the bodies were found discarded in illegal dumping sites, buried beneath piles of garbage.
MacBook Neo. Meet Windows. You can use literally any
chill,
Windows
man?
app
Like,
you
I'm watching a
want.
serious video right now.
Over this period, the police were finding bodies nearly every 6 weeks. The police theorized that the killing was at the hands of the same perpetrator, but unfortunately for the longest time, there were no leads. Homicide investigators from Illinois and Missouri police and the FBI joined forces and created a task force. But again, more bodies appeared, having undergone a brutal, degrading murder with the same modus operandi. The task force thought that the murderer was arrogant,
Every
as
6
he would
weeks
sometimes
had to be held, though. Y'all know? Do y'all realize that's like half a month? It's like a month and a half, bro.
the bodies to be easily discovered. At first, they thought the profile of the killer would be a white male trucker, as many of the bodies were left along roads just outside the city. But as more and more bodies turned up, they believed it was a man who was familiar with the area. Early into the investigation, Maury Travis was dubbed the Streetwalker Killer. It took several months before the news outlets started reporting on these murders. A journalist named Bill Smith wrote a heartfelt and bold front-page piece on the women who had been killed. He saw that these vulnerable women who had been murdered were being forgotten about, as very few people came forward to identify the bodies. He saw it as a complete injustice, and believed that this would empower the killer to continue. But just 5 days later, Bill received a peculiar letter in his work mailbox. Bill opened the letter and read the first line. It read, "Nice sub-story about Teresa." But then, Bill read on. It said, "Write a good story about Greenwade, and I'll tell you where the other bodies are. To prove I'm real, here's directions to
This
victim
nigga think he the Riddler, bro. This piece of
The
shit,
17.
bro.
A map was provided with the letter X marking the spot. The letter was handed over to the task force. Just as it described, Alyssa was found at the mapped location on a map provided to Bill.
This nigga was, bro. What is wrong with this dude, bro?
However, the police
Yo.
now had a lead. Maury had used an online digital map to send to Bill. A team of expert digital forensic analysts was assembled to track down the online map that Maury had used to direct Bill to Alyssa's body. The police knew there was only a 5-day window between the initial news report and the day that Bill received the letter. Their task was clear: find the exact map online and determine who had accessed it within that time frame. The map was from Expedia.com, which exclusively used maps from Microsoft. The police reached out to Microsoft for user data, but the company was reluctant to cooperate. But a subpoena was issued, and Microsoft handed over the data. The map in question covered a small specific section of St. Louis. The police hoped that the number of users who had accessed it during the 5-day window could be minimal, and they were right. Only one computer had downloaded that very section of the map. Tracing the IP address led them to an MSN account registered under the username Maury Travis. This name brought them to a property where Maury had been living, the house which sat atop his murder dungeon. On the 7th of June 2002, Sergeant Tom Sachs of the St. Louis Police Force headed to Maury's residence in Ferguson in the morning. After banging on the door, the officer was met by a riled-up Maury Travis and his girlfriend. Maury's first words to the police officer was, "It's 7 o'clock in the morning." Tim Sachs replied and said, "Yeah, you're right, and here's a search warrant." Maury then said, "Why do you need to search my house?" And Tim replied by saying, "You know exactly why we're here." The police believed that they had caught the streetwalker strangler, but what they didn't expect was the sheer volume of evidence waiting for them. The police searched the house and quickly realized that they had uncovered something far worse than they had anticipated. They found the computer they were looking for, but they also found women's wigs, pairs of high heels, jewelry, and a stun gun locked in the desk drawer. They even found a book on how to conduct torture and articles regarding his victims. Within the walls of the torture chamber were a collection of homemade videotapes. One videotape was labeled The Wedding Day. This had several edits and cuts which showed Maury torturing, abusing, and forcing himself upon different women. A moment later, it cut to a part where he is killing Cassandra Walker. You can see how she was chained up to a wooden central pillar in the basement. Her legs and hands are restrained, and she is pleading with him to let her go. In that moment, he picks up a belt and strangles her to death. Now, what exactly happened on these tapes was so disturbing that each officer that reviewed the tapes was given psychological treatment after.
Damn.
They were described as beyond twisted and horrifically graphic. The basement painted an even darker picture. The police uncovered a makeshift prison cell. Blood covered the walls, ceiling, doors, and the carpet. Even the furniture was stained red. This was the setting for most of these videotapes that he had made. Investigators searching Maury's home found a crude diagram detailing plans for a basement extension. He intended to build 2 prison cells where he would chain up his victims, and the plans were incredibly well thought out. They included air vents for the basements, ensuring ventilation. He wanted to make sure it was well concealed, so he drew crawl ports instead of doors. Since there was no bathroom facilities, he made a list of supplies which included adult diapers. It was clear that he was preparing to keep women captive for an extended period of time,
fuck?
inferring he must have gotten bored of his current methods. It turned out that Maury's girlfriend had no idea what was going on in the house she lived in, or what Maury had planned.
Bro, that's what you call a dumb bitch, bro. So you mean to tell me you didn't walk around the house, you ain't at least go in the basement not once? Nothing? And the thing is, these wigs was saved as like souvenirs. I'm pretty sure if you seen that, you would think the motherfucker was cheating or something, right? That would make sense. Like, where was he keeping all this shit at?
She swore
couldn't have just
that
been
she
the
had
basement,
never
man.
gone into the basement, and that the basement was for Maury only.
Okay, credit.
Man, fuck that. You
Wait,
could have convinced
you even
them
listening?
to let you down
You've
there.
been taking a single note this entire.
Maury was questioned for 4 hours on his sofa before being taken in for interrogation. Initially, he was arrested.
Yo, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm pretty sure it probably was a time when that nigga wasn't home either. So you definitely could have checked that joint.
kidnapping charges
Everybody
linked
not
to two
listening
victims,
to.
Betty James and Alyssa Greenwade. Investigators then matched tire tracks on Betty's leg. They were linked to Maury's car. It was now a priority for the police to identify and locate the other victims who were in these tapes and whose DNA covered the basement in the form of bloodstains. But Maury, he wasn't cooperating. There was no emotion, no guilt, no remorse. He was described by the police officers as nothing but a monster. He sat there unfazed, asking the police officers how they had found him. His arrogance was unsettling. He even remarked that the interviewer was boring and that he wanted to have someone more challenging. Maury seemed unable to believe that he had finally been caught, but then the police revealed that it was the letter to Bill Smith that led to him being apprehended. And with this, his demeanor shifted. He drummed his fingers on the table restlessly. His body shifted in the chair, sliding back and forth, and he further refused to cooperate. Maury was then placed in a super maximum jail cell and was placed on round-the-clock observations. This is a common practice for criminals who may face the death penalty. Observations were scheduled for every 15 minutes. But on the 10th of June 2002, guards at the St. Louis County Jail found Maury dead in his cell. He had been able to create a makeshift noose, and 2 consecutive checks had been missed. In those 45 minutes, he had enough time to tear a strip from his bedsheet, thread it through an air vent above the toilet, and end it all. He even managed to restrain his own hands behind his back, preventing himself from instinctively fighting for survival. Inside his cell, they found a note addressed to his mother. It read, "Dear Mum, I'm sorry for the pain I have caused you and the family. My death seems to be the only way out, and a fast end to all of this publicity. You were the best mother a man could have, but I've been sick in the head for a long time, since I was around 14. I don't know why, I was just sick. I have never felt normal or happy at any time in my life. This seems to be the best solution for all involved, especially me, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life locked up. Or worse, let them kill me with a needle. Tell Grandma, Marina, James, and everybody that I love them dearly, but I love you the most. Forever your son, Maury Travis." The investigators who analyzed the
That
note
nigga
saw
did not
no
know how to
admission.
write either. Did y'all see that? Whoa, wait. Say. You know what? This handwriting might be better than mine. That's the crazy part.
Your son, Maury Travis. The investigators who analyzed the note saw no admission of guilt for the murders. They also believed that a significant event pushed him towards becoming a cold-blooded killer around the age of 14. But when detectives interviewed those who knew him, they found nothing. No signs of childhood trauma, or any trauma for that matter. No clear trigger that could explain his descent into murder. Unfortunately, Maury never faced trial. He never stood before the families of the women he manipulated, humiliated, and destroyed. By the time of his death, the police had linked him to 12 victims, but in
I'ma
his
keep
own
it a beam.
words,
Based off how them women was living, like especially when he was saying the ones where like they would the one that left her kid on a bench in the park near the payphone, and anytime she would have a client, she would go, and then she was never seen again, bro. I don't think half of them actually had families. That's probably the crazy part. You gotta think about it like that. Like you gotta think about it like this, right? If you struggling that bad, which they probably was, you think they had family that was really gonna help them, bro? I don't think so, man. Like that's a rough lifestyle, bro. That's probably what happened.
there were at least 17. Detectives in the surrounding counties have suspected that he might be the murderer in several other cases, increasing the potential murder count to over 20. The strongest theory suggests that he had a deep hatred for women who sold their bodies, but no one can say for sure. The case of Maury Travis remains a puzzle.
That sound like trauma right there. Did he go through something? I'm just being real. Like listen, y'all. I'm not justifying the fact that he killed those women. It's just like that sound like some type of trauma. And that sound like, you mean to tell me, y'all gotta understand, it makes sense. He felt sick since he was 14, and then when he turned into a grown man, he did some shit like that. Kind of piecing the piece together. What type of mother was his mom or his sisters and any of them? That's really my question. I ain't even gonna lie. We gotta really look at his family background, bro. I'm not even gonna hold you. But that's crazy.
Puzzle unsolved. His motives were never fully understood.
And then nobody like caught on to the fact that the nigga might need therapy. Like, I'm pretty sure if a child is showing signs of that, that would definitely mean that. We might react to one more. I'm not even gonna hold you. Yeah, I'm about to get back to y'all when we got the other one. I almost did the outro, my fault, y'all. But yeah, we about to go back to the other one because I seen one that's interesting right there. I see this little interesting one right here. I got y'all though. The woman in the motel shower. Now, I don't know if this is gonna be a good or bad one. I haven't really watched the video yet for real, so I don't know how entertaining or this gonna be, or if it's even a crime video for real. But yeah, we finna get into it though. I'm gonna just say that.
Please subscribe, thank you.
Let's see what this is about. The woman in the
This
motel
case takes
shower.
place in the USA in the year 1991. Inside an Albuquerque motel room, staff discovered a young woman with no identification, but among the belongings was something unusual. There was a photograph taken when she was still alive. It was the woman with a young man, and according to the motel reception records, the room had been rented out by a man. Were they the same person? The room contained a suitcase, a purse, and $500 in cash, and one horrific sight in the bathroom. For almost 35 years, the police could not confirm her full name. Then, in 2026, the same year as the recording of this video, on the woman's 55th birthday, everything changed. On the night of the 3rd of June 1991, room 233 of the Super 8 motel was rented. It was in the name of Eduardo Collin. The room was paid for in cash, or at least the first day was, not the second. And, after the stay was finished, this Eduardo guy didn't check out. He just seemed to have left. The motel staff soon noticed this, and that the last night had not been paid for. When staff arrived at the door, they saw the Do Not Disturb sign remaining on the handle. This would imply that someone was inside.
Okay, sounds great right now. I'm thinking a burger.
Deciding what to eat, each child up inside.
Hey yo, chill, man.
But when the motel employees knocked, there was no reply. The lock was locked from the inside, and the windows were secured tight. The staff got the help from the security staff, who alerted the supervisor. They weren't sure exactly what was waiting for them on the other side of the door. When they arrived back at the door, they used a passkey and a screwdriver to open it. Working for a motel, I can imagine that you must see a lot, but nothing prepared them for what was inside. They found a young woman in the bathroom. A strap, believed to have come from a suitcase, was around her neck and attached to the shower fixture. Her body was positioned inside the bathtub. The emergency services were called right away, and when they arrived, they quickly confirmed that she was indeed dead. But it didn't really need a medical professional to know this. It was extremely obvious. It turns out that in June of 1991, in New Mexico, they were experiencing a record-level heat wave, and putrefaction and decomposition had already set in very, very fast. In fact, it was so bad, it was impossible to even identify her by looking at her face. Because there was no obvious signs of a struggle, her death was ruled as a self-unalive. But she carried no identification, and nothing immediately connected her to this man named Eduardo Collin. This young woman was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed around 140 pounds. She had long, curly, strawberry blonde hair, and her eyes were hazel. She wore a bright white, pink, red, and yellow multicolored tank top. She wore white Guess jeans that had zips near the lower outside edges of the legs. her body gave the police very little to go off, but then they turned to the room. Room 233 contained several belongings. There was a suitcase filled with women's clothing. There was a dark suede handbag with a pocketbook and a wallet inside. There was also cigarettes and several empty beer bottles, and 5 $100 bills. And then there was a photograph. A small photograph was found, taken in the style of a photo booth. It showed what appeared to be the young woman alive beside a young man. Both faces could be clearly seen. There was also a small digital weighing scale, the kind used to weigh drugs. Written on it was another name, George Martinez. So, the room was registered to Eduardo Collin. The scale said George Martinez, and the photograph showed a man who may have been either of the men. Back in 1991, the police circulated the young woman's description. They released the photograph and a reconstruction of her face. She was initially believed to be around 22 years old, but then later profiles placed her as old as 35. Police also attempted to trace Eduardo Collin. However, the license plate given to the receptionist by Eduardo was incorrect, which made things incredibly hard. George Martinez had no link to the scene whatsoever, beside the engraving on the scales, and trying to identify the woman or the man in the photograph just seemed to be too difficult. So in the end, months turned into years, which then turned into decades, and the case went cold on all fronts. Well, that was until the year 2008. When the case received renewed attention in 2008, investigators learned that the physical evidence from the motel room had already been disposed of. This wasn't a great start, because contents of the room could no longer be examined with modern DNA methods. But not everything was gone. Authorities had retained the woman's fingerprints and dental information, and most importantly, they had preserved a biological sample. The investigators were able to find and track down Eduardo Collin's relatives. However, it turned out that Eduardo had already died. His family recognized his handwriting on the motel registration. However, they also said that the young man beside the woman in the photograph was not Eduardo, so perhaps this was George. But from this, the case went cold again, and the next major breakthrough came in March of 2021. FBI investigators had received a new tip. Whoever had given this tip claimed to have known the woman, and they said that her name might have been Becca, and that she may have had connections to Los Angeles County. The tip mentioned that she may have traveled to Albuquerque by plane from Los Angeles, and it turned out that this was a credible tip. After 30 years, the Albuquerque Jane Doe finally was given a chance to be uncovered, and her name was indeed Becca. But investigators still had no surname and no confirmed address. The link to California obviously covered an enormous area, so her first name was surprisingly not as helpful as you might think. Because of this, the case became widely known as Becca Doe. In 2011, another unexpected event occurred. The wife of George Martinez saw the coverage of the Becca Doe case. She was watching the news when all of a sudden the photograph popped up. Becca Doe and the mysterious man was shown. In that moment she knew that was her young husband, George Martinez. So she persuaded her husband to come forward and explain to the police who she was. And of course he said that her name was Becca, which corroborated the previous tip. He remembered her as being around 18 or 19. According to George, he had driven her to an airport before she traveled to Albuquerque. He also remembered friends asking about her after she disappeared. George was never named as a suspect or alleged to have done anything wrong, mainly because no reliable evidence places him in Albuquerque when Becca died. But unfortunately, he didn't know her surname, and he knew very little about who she was or where she lived, or at least so he claimed. During 2025, investigators began a new attempt to identify her through genetic genealogy. The biological sample which had been preserved was sent to a laboratory, and by January of 2026, the profile was complete and uploaded to software, which narrowed down the genealogical links. Within days, one name emerged, Becca Malacuti, and what's more, the family tree led investigators back to California. Police and FBI did a little digging, and they located Becca's stepfather in Ventura. He remembered seeing her for the last time in 1991, when she left the LA area. Ventura police then located her half-brother. He provided a DNA sample to validate the genealogical evidence. The direct comparison confirmed that the young woman from room 233 was indeed his half-sister. On the 4th of March 2026, the Albuquerque Jane Doe was formally identified as being Becca. Becca was only 18 years old when she died. For almost 35 years, the public could see Becca's face, but they did not know her name. Now the photograph is no longer an image of Albuquerque Jane Doe. It is a photograph of Becca. The official ruling remains that she did whatever she did to herself in the hotel room. But some people suspect that the man who accompanied Becca to the Albuquerque motel may have been involved in her death. After all, he rented the room for 2 people, supplied an incorrect license plate number, and left before Becca was found dead. Her identification was also missing, raising suspicion that he could have killed her or caused her death before staging the crime scene. However, there is no confirmed evidence that Colin murdered her. The room was reportedly locked from the inside, and there was no signs of struggle. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think in the comments section below. And now we arrive to the second case. This case takes place in the USA. On the 26th of October 1997, at around 2:30 in the afternoon, a man was canoeing through the Ryan Slough, just north of Eureka, California. On this day, he, along with
Wait, why did the other one we react to, why didn't it have 2 videos in it, or 3?
a friend were hunting
What are they about
ducks.
to do?
But then he saw what appeared to be an object on the muddy shoreline. Moving closer, he saw something that appeared to be a mannequin, but he soon realized that this was no mannequin at all. It was part of a human body. Upon seeing this, the man immediately called the emergency services. The police soon arrived, and deputies recovered the torso of an adult woman. Investigators believed it had floated there, and they immediately treated the case as a homicide. Identification looked almost impossible. The woman's head, arms, and legs had been removed, along with her breasts. The torso had
What?
also been cut open
Oh, hell
down
no.
the center, and her body had been stabbed 27 times, mainly in the back and the buttocks. Because the neck and head were missing, however, the recovered remains could not independently establish the precise mechanism that killed her.
Need to run Windows on your Mac? Parallels Desktop
That's
makes
crazy,
it
I'm not
simple
even
to
gonna
integrate
lie.
Windows apps in.
Investigators estimated
Somebody
that the woman was
removed-
roughly 18 to 25 years old, and that she had been dead for several days. With no face and no usable fingerprints, this woman became known as the Humboldt County Jane Doe. Detectives compared her with missing women across California, but by January of 1998, they had reviewed more than 100 missing women, and they didn't find a single match. Not too long after this, 2 people were cutting firewood at Calm Beach near McKinleyville, and they found what appeared to be a human arm beside the shoreline. Terrified, they called the police. Deputies recovered it and transferred the arm to the coroner. DNA testing would eventually establish that the arm belonged to the very same unidentified woman, but deterioration prevented investigators from obtaining the fingerprints that they so desperately needed. Then, 373 days after the torso was found, the police got a lucky break. In November of 1998, a 36-year-old man named Wayne Adam Ford arrived at the police station with his older brother. In his pocket was a plastic bag, and this plastic bag contained a severed human breast. But this body part did not belong to the unidentified woman. It belonged to another victim, a woman named Patricia Ann Tanners. Ford began telling officers
Y'all
that he
niggas
had
is
hurt
cutting off people's titties, bro? There's no fucking way.
several women and began admitting to killing 4 women across California. When detectives questioned him about the torso they had found, Ford supplied details that investigators said lined up with the physical evidence. Ford claimed that he had picked up the unidentified woman while she was hitchhiking in Eureka and taken her to his trailer. But his explanation of her death was incomplete and self-serving. Ford said that he would often practice choking during sex, and sometimes attempted to revive women with CPR after they became unconscious. On this occasion, he claimed, the woman had stopped breathing, and he was no longer able to revive her. He portrayed the death as an accident, and became vague when the detectives pressed him on the exact details. It was clear that the choking was a deliberate act of violence, and not a consensual act that had gone accidentally wrong. However, this was not something that the recovered torso could medically prove because the head and neck were never found. Ford said he moved the body into the bathtub of his trailer and used a hunting knife and a razor blade to dismember her. He said he removed her head,
Aw, man, what
arms,
the
legs,
fuck?
and breasts, and opened up the torso and inflicted the numerous stab wounds to her body. Ford told investigators that he needed to make the body smaller, apparently so that it could be transported and disposed of more easily. Ford admitted to keeping some of the remains in the freezer before moving and discarding them elsewhere. He said he placed the head and arms in the Mad River area and put the torso into the Slough system and concealed the thighs and other tissue near a campsite outside of Trinidad. Guided by his statements, investigators searched his trailer and his encampment and recovered additional remains belonging to the same woman. However, there were some portions of her thigh that were never recovered, and the woman's head and neck were also never found. As you can imagine, Ford was arrested that night. The wider investigation connected him to the other murders, Tina Gibbs, Lynette White, and Patricia Tamers. But also there was the unidentified woman, and the police were no closer to discovering who she truly was. In June of 2006, a court convicted him of 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death later that year, but for more than 2 decades, investigators continued trying to identify...
Wait, so this nigga basically just said the main reason he did it was because they died on accident. What the fuck was you doing to these people? I'm not sure. Wait, is that what? Wait, so what the fuck was he doing to these people for them to die during you know what?
The mysterious woman. For years, investigators had the woman's DNA, but no name to match it. Her profile was entered into a national missing person database, yet repeated comparisons failed to produce a match. However, it would later turn out that the problem was that this woman had never officially been listed as missing. A breakthrough finally came after a dedicated cold case unit was established in 2021, and investigators selected the unidentified victim for more advanced DNA testing. The analysis led them to someone who appeared to be closely related to the victim. When investigators contacted this person, they asked if anyone in the family had disappeared, and this is when they were told about a woman named Kerry. Kerry had gone missing in the mid-1990s. Detectives followed the lead, and they met up with Kathy Cummings. Kathy explained that her family had last heard from Kerry Ann Cummings in 1997. Scientists compared Kathy's DNA with a profile obtained from the remains. The results confirmed that the 2 women were sisters. It was at this point that the victim was officially identified as Kerry. She was born in 1972 and was approximately 25 years old when she was murdered.
Bro, these families gotta be the dumbest motherfuckers ever. So you mean to tell me y'all didn't know where your sister was for that many years? Like, what the fuck be going on with y'all? Like, I'm now starting to realize, bro, a lot of these families have a lot of, like, neglect issues, bro. Cause y'all, they didn't even have a missing person report. They didn't have a missing person report for this girl, bro. That's crazy.
Her sister Kathy remembered her as a beautiful, funny, intelligent, and artistic girl, and someone who was always able to make the family laugh. But during her 20s, something happened to Kerry. During the family's final contact with her in 1997, she was suffering from serious, untreated mental illness, and it's believed that she was couch searching in the Eugene, Oregon area. Her relatives repeatedly offered to bring her home, but she simply refused. After losing contact with her in 1997, the family had reportedly tried to file missing person reports in both Arizona and Oregon, and they even hired a private investigator. But because she was an adult who appeared to have left voluntarily, no formal report was ever accepted. As a result,
That's crazy.
her name and her relatives'
So
DNA
wait,
were
so
absent
this they made it like she ain't like they ain't tried all though. Like
from the systems that the detectives were using to search for her identity. And exactly how she came into contact with Wayne Adam Ford remains unknown to this day. And tragically, her head has never been recovered.
that's fucked up, bro. Man, these people need to be thrown. Actually, don't even throw him in the jail. Just kill his bitch ass, bro. That's crazy. Damn. Is that the end of it? Alright, well, I ain't gonna lie, y'all. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, you know what I'm saying? I know I did. Not like in a good way, though, for real. Not in a... What the fuck am I talking about? Not in a, I shouldn't even enjoy hearing about stories like this, bro. I'm not even gonna lie. And I don't enjoy it. Damn. That's some fucked up cases, though. No bullshit. But I ain't even gonna lie, y'all. I'm not gonna say I hope y'all enjoyed this shit, bro. If it made you feel horrible, it made you feel horrible. I know I do a little bit too. These people's really sick in this video. I'm not even gonna lie. But like, y'all be safe out there. You know, stay out the way. You know what I'm saying? That shit crazy that this shit really that this is really real life. Like, this is why I really don't like. This is why I really don't like the human race for real. Like, at times, like, this is the pros and cons to motherfuckers being human, bro. They really do some sick ass shit like this, and you will never know what leads them to do that. And it's only humans, by the way. It's only humans, by the way, y'all. Don't no other creatures think like that but humans. Probably like gorillas and stuff like that, but that's like kind of like instincts. Like, human beings behave like animals. That's so crazy to me, bro. I ain't gonna lie, y'all be safe out there. You know, cause you know shit like this is still happening. But yeah, we out. We good been. It's your boy Mo.